Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Brown. But my name is Lindsay Brown. I'm the director of the Performance Nutrition Program at Washington State University Athletics. And I have been there for about 7 years. So when I was hired, I was the first full-time RD on staff. And so there wasn't a lot of infrastructure for me when I entered. And it's been a great 7 years to be able to build the program. And one of those building blocks is developing the hydration program there. And you will soon know why it's so important. Feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions throughout the presentation. I'll leave about 10 minutes or so of Q&A if you want to wait till that time, but I'm really great with interaction. So please feel free, because a lot of the athletes, they don't raise their hands, they just blurt out. So I'm really good with going with the flow of things. So topics that we're going to talk about are going to be defining hydration and dehydration, and then electrolytes, current fluid and electrolyte recommendations for the athlete, and then strategies to keep athletes well hydrated. And when I'm referring to an athlete, I'm referring to an adult athlete. So wanting to make sure that you understand what population that I'm going to be referring to. Will not be referring to adolescents or children, but adult population that are highly active. Okay, so this is my motto with the student athletes at WSU. So the first step into optimizing performance is through proper hydration. And the reason for that is the foundation of life is fluids, right? If you don't have water, you don't have life. So the slightest decrease in your hydration level is going to impact your performance, okay, and function as a human being. So I, for example, worked with a team this past summer a lot on hydration. And we'll talk about the strategies and things that I use, but I told them, if you do not conquer this, we will continue to talk about the same thing each time that we meet. And I don't think they believed me. So 6 weeks later, when we were talking about the same topic and doing the same thing, they were just like, oh, you were serious about this, weren't you? And absolutely, because if you can't get the hydration component, there's no point of moving on as an athlete. You have to understand how to hydrate your body. So what is proper hydration? So that's called euhydration. So that's when the body's normal state of water content, and that's about 10 gallons. On average, for an average human, you have about 10 gallons of fluid running through your body. And this is to carry out normal bodily functions. And for an athlete, they're not asked to do normal bodily functions, they're asked to do extremely high bodily functions or intense bodily functions. So dehydration is the act of losing more fluids than what your body is replacing, so what you're consuming. So when you are dehydrated, that's going to lead to hypohydration. So that's a state of being dehydrated. So this can range from mild to severe, and we'll talk about the signs and symptoms and the differences between those. But how many of you knew you have 10 gallons of water moving through your body? It's a lot. Okay, so why is water important for us? So this cool little diagram shows you all of the important, well not all, but most of the important functions that water does in the body. So water is involved in every cell in our body. So again, if you're dehydrated, every cell in your body is compromised, right? The function of the cell is going to be compromised. So it helps with saliva production, keeps your skin moist, allows the body to grow, survive, that was just really important, flushes waste from the body. And this is really important for athletes because you're producing a lot more waste than the normal person, right? Through lactic acid, through protein breakdown. So you have to make sure that you're properly hydrated in order to filter out the waste through your kidneys. If you don't have enough fluid on board, your kidneys are gonna be working a lot harder than if you had enough fluid on board to properly get the waste out from your body. Regulates body temperature, which is huge. So for athletes who are out in hot, humid conditions, if you're dehydrated, your body's ability to regulate your temperature is going to be compromised, which is a problem because then that leads to heat-related illnesses, which I've seen every year during fall camp. There's somebody that has some type of heat-related illness, and every time we find out that they're dehydrated. So hydration plays a huge role in body temperature regulation. Acts as a shock absorber. So in athletics, concussions it's a huge topic right now, or it has been in the last 5 years. So if an athlete is dehydrated and they get concussed, is their concussion going to be more severe than compared if they were well hydrated, because there's more fluid in the brain to help absorb that force. So those are some studies that hopefully will come out before too long, studying hydration status and then severity of concussion. Converts food to components needed for survival and digestion. Helps with that whole process of breaking down carbohydrates, fat, protein, helps get that energy to your cells. So that's very important. Delivers oxygen all over the body, which is extremely important as well. So for an average adult male, you're made up of about 60% fluid. Females, it's a little less. I know a lot of times people throw out the term about 75%. It's a little less than 75%. But there are components in your body that are made up of more than 75% or around that amount. So if you look at your brains and lungs, those are pretty close, or 73 to 83%. Muscles, a little less than 80%. Bones. I don't think many of us think about bones having water, but they are made up of water. So, question for you all, why do you think females have less water content than males? Any guess? Nobody? Larger, yep. What else? Any other guesses? Okay, who has more muscle mass, male or female, on average? Who? Huh? Males, yes. Males have a larger muscle mass than females, right? They have a larger muscle content. So as you can see, muscles are around 79% of fluid, water mass. So if you have a lower percent body fat, then you're going to have a higher water content. So that's why there's that difference. And that should be, that's normal. Do athletes have greater or lesser content of water compared to the average adult? So if we're comparing male and female athletes to male and female regular adults. Yes. And why is that? Yes. So their percent body fat is going to be lesser. The range is going to be lesser than what a normal or average male and female adult will be. So they're going to have greater water content. So more likely that 60 and 55% is going to be greater in the male and the female athlete. Okay? And this is one that I just threw in there. Do babies and children have more or less water content than adults? Huh? Kind of a trick question. So they have more. But you wouldn't think so because they have like more muscle mass than adults. But babies actually have, when they're born, about 75% water content, and then it drops to about 65% after their first year of life. But that's why with babies and children, dehydration can be so severe. The onset can be very quickly. So that's why it's really important to make sure babies and kiddos are well hydrated if they're going out in the heat and doing activity. because their body won't tolerate as much of a drop as adults will. Okay, so this isn't a good combination for the athletic population. So dehydration is something that we want to try to prevent or minimize. Greater than 2% water content loss, and an athlete can do the following: decrease cognitive function. So when you're trying to make a split decision, you're going to be a little bit slower when you're dehydrated. Reaction time is going to go down. So that's going to be the difference between catching the ball or not, making a steal or not. So that reaction time is going to be a little bit slower. Cardiac output is going to decrease. Even though your heart is working harder when you're dehydrated, your blood is more viscous. So more viscous means, the way that I describe this to our athletes, it's a little bit of an extreme example, but it gets the point across. So water, if I had a cup of water and a cup of honey and I poured them, which one's going to pour out faster? Which one's going to empty the quickest? Water, because it's less viscous, right? Honey is more viscous. So I explained to them when they're dehydrated, their blood is almost like honey, which again, this is an extreme example, but it gets the point across. It's like honey, so it's like a lot slower getting through the body. Your heart has to work harder, pump more often, more beats per minute than if you were well hydrated, okay? Increased risk of injury. So I put this little thing up here because this is something that I did last year, where if an athlete had a soft tissue injury, I just tested their hydration status, and I found out 100% of them were significantly dehydrated. So there is a strong, strong correlation between soft tissue injury and dehydration, and significant dehydration. It increases the recovery period. So like I was talking about, your kidneys have a hard time filtering out that waste if you're dehydrated. So that's going to increase your recovery period between bouts of exercise, because you're going to have that lactic acid buildup, you're going to have that protein degradation, that stuff that your body is going to be like, let's get out of there, let's move it along, but it really can't. So it's going to increase that recovery period. And that's where if athletes are having a hard time recovering, then I look at their hydration status as well as nutrient intake. So the different categories of dehydration, you have mild, moderate, and severe. Mild dehydration is going to be about 1 to 3% of fluid loss. Okay, this is going to be like just like that slight runner's headache that people experience maybe after running. Dry mouth, but not really really thirsty. Urine output, you're going to have some, but it's not going to be in a great amount. And then a little bit of decreased appetite, fatigue, and then slow reaction time somewhat. Don't really get into this too much until we get to the moderate. So that's 4 to 6% body weight loss through fluid. This time you're going to have a pretty good headache. You're going to be like, yeah, I can feel it. You can feel, I get a lot of complaints when athletes are like, they can feel the pounding in their head as their pulse beats. So they can really feel that. You'll experience that thirst feeling. At this point, you're going to be really thirsty. You want to drink something. You will have little to no urine output, and the color is going to be like an amber color. I describe this as like apple juice. So when I do hydration talks with the athletes, lemonade and apple juice, I might ruin it for life for them, but it gets the point across. So if it's more like lemonade, really pale yellow, it's an indicator that you're well hydrated. If it's more like apple juice, then you need to drink some more fluids. Muscle cramping. So this is point that we'll see athletes go into. A lot of times it's going to be lower leg, lower body, leg cramps. This can be a combination of dehydration and muscle fatigue. So it can be a combination of both those things. Nausea and vomiting might show up in this area too. So not wanting, definitely appetite's down, but you're kind of feeling nauseous. Sometimes you're going to get some chills in this one, but in the severe dehydration, definitely going to feel more of those chills. So severe dehydration, 7 to 10% body weight loss. So rapid pulse at rest. So if you're sitting down, heart rate's beating extremely fast, you can't control it. Heavy breathing, your blood pressure might drop out, you might faint. This could also lead to like seizures, coma, and then unfortunately death if it's not treated promptly. So we really tried to prevent athletes going definitely in that 7 to 10%. The highest I've seen within the athletic population when I do weigh in and weigh out is about 6% is the highest that I've ever seen. But the one thing with this, and I'll explain how you can figure your sweat losses, is we don't technically know how hydrated an athlete is going into competition or activity if we just do the weigh in and weigh out approach. So I'll talk about what we can do to help bridge that gap. Okay, so what factors play into fluid loss and what increases it? So RDs need to look at the athlete's environment. Are they working out outside? What are the temperatures like? Are they inside? Is it an air-conditioned facility or non-air conditioned during the summer months? So we need to look at those things to develop a good hydration plan for them. So things that are going to factor into this. Number one is genetics. There are basically the identical athlete, same sport. One person is going to lose 2 liters per hour and the other one 0.5 liters per hour of sweat. And it's all dependent upon their sweat gland activity. So they can be in the same environment, everything else is constant, but their genetics are different. So you have to look into, are they a heavy sweater? And the best way I can tell this with athletes is look at their jerseys. If they are drenched in 10 minutes, I know, like after a warm-up, I know that they're a heavy sweater. But if they can play an entire game and just have a little bit of sweat ring, then I know that they're not as heavy of a sweater. Hot temperatures. So this is typically will play in greater than 75 degrees. That it will really impact sweat rate. High humidity, about greater than 75%. So athletes can have heat-related illnesses pop up, like if the temperature is around 70 to 75, but the humidity is like 90%. They can have some heat-related, some dehydration-related issues because the humidity is so high and it makes it feel hotter than what it is. I'm from Oklahoma, so the humidity is a little bit higher down there, as well as the temperatures. Up here it's really nice. I really enjoy the low humidity. But yeah, humidity plays a huge role. Extra layers of clothing. And we don't think about this very often, but during the cooler months, winter months, athletes are layering up. And so that body heat is trapped, and they're going to increase their sweat rate because their core temperature is obviously pretty high under all those layers. And sauna suits are not, they're against NCAA regulation, and we don't have wrestling, but if a person's wearing a sauna suit, same thing occurs, which they're probably doing that for a particular reason, which I would not recommend to purposely dehydrate yourself. But high intensity activities, so if the intensity of the activity is really high, you're going to increase sweat rate. Long duration of activity, so the duration, if you have an hour practice compared to a 3-hour practice, you're going to sweat more during the longer period. So the next thing are electrolytes. So we don't just lose water through our sweat. We lose these important things called electrolytes. And so I rate the electrolyte loss from greatest to least in your sweat. And this is based off of a liter of sweat, which sounds a little gross, but a liter of sweat, you are going to lose mostly chloride. Okay, so a lot of people don't think like table salt. So table salt is sodium and chloride. So when you mix table salt, if you're making a home sports drink, you're getting both of those. Sodium's about 40% of table salt, and then 60% chloride. Sodium is next. And these ranges I have found have varied site to site, but I usually, rule of thumb, use about 500 to 1,000 milligrams per liter of sweat, just as my baseline. But there's studies that have shown athletes, larger male athletes, during fall football camp, they lose up to 3 grams of sodium per hour, which is, I mean, huge. When you think about the nutrition recommendations for a normal diet is around 2,300, they're losing 3,000 milligrams in 1 hour. So we have to replace a lot of sodium within a day for them. Potassium, calcium, and then magnesium. So the main functions of electrolytes. The easiest way I can explain it to my athletes is it's like they conduct electricity in the body. So it helps contract and relax your muscles. So I try to paint that vision for them because they kind of see that, you know, for your heart. It helps contract and relax. It helps maintain fluid balance. I'm sure some of you have learned about the sodium-potassium pump. So if that's out of whack, then that's not great. And then assists with transmitting nerve pulses throughout the body. So those are really important functions. So if we're just replacing water in the diet or during exercise, we're missing a whole realm of really good things that can keep our athletes going during activity. So we have to incorporate electrolytes appropriately. And I didn't put it on here, but this can lead, so if you just replace water, and you find this in kind of your weekend warriors, more amateur athletes, hyponatremia. So hyponatremia is caused by an overload of water without electrolytes, and it can flush out your sodium, leaving you with very low sodium blood content, and that can result, it's actually almost more dangerous in like moderate to severe dehydration. So, and you, like I said, you find this a lot with more in females who are like training for a marathon, first time, second time, going out, and they think, oh, I need to drink a lot of water leading up, and they forget about the electrolytes, and it can lead to hyponatremia, which can be very dangerous. So electrolytes are extremely important, even for the weekend warrior. If you're exercising greater than 60 minutes, you need to get something in with electrolytes. Okay, so fluid intake per day. For the average, again, adult male and female, this is not active or athlete population. For adults, it's about a little under a gallon. So 3.3 liters is a little under a gallon. And then females is a little over half a gallon of fluid intake. This is kind of just like baseline. So I take this based off of what I've experienced with the WSU athletes. About 6 liters is the average for a male, and about 3.5 liters for a female. So that's what I found in my practice with working with the athletes that are going to meet their needs. So what counts towards their fluid needs? There's a lot of things. There's some things that I don't like promote heavily on there, but it still goes towards your fluid needs. So obviously water. Water is the best hydrator out there. Sports drink, juice, coffee, tea, dairy products, even pop will count towards your fluid needs. And foods that are high in water content. So I put a picture up there. Your fruits and vegetables are going to contain your highest water content. So these are going to help hydrate as well as provide a great source of what electrolyte do you think are high in fruits? Any guess?
Sodium,
potassium. Yeah. Sodium, if you add salt to the watermelon, you'll be good. But potassium is going to be extremely high in fruits. And that's one thing that sports drinks, I feel personally, don't do a great job of providing us enough potassium. Okay, so pre-exercise recommendations, how to hydrate before exercise, or what's the amount. I put an example here. For a 150-pound athlete, it's going to be about 2 to 4 milliliters per pound of body weight, which is about 10 to 20 ounces, 2 to 4 hours before, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. I would recommend on the upper end of that. But the reason why you need to have it that far out is because your kidneys can only process about 24 to 32 ounces of fluid per hour. So if you consume too much at one time, your kidneys aren't going to have time to really process and absorb it into your tissue. It's just going to go right out through your urine. You're going to have to go pee frequently. So we really want that fluid to absorb into the muscle because that is what is needed and important. Okay, so during exercise, there's a lot of recommendations here. So during exercise, like I said, the sweat rate for athletes range huge. I mean, it's huge, 0.3 liters to 2.4 liters an hour. It's a huge range. So the way that we can test them, we can do sweat tests on them to collect how much fluid they're losing as well as electrolytes they are losing during activity, but that's time and money to do that. So again, we kind of use the eye test and see, how much are they sweating? What type of signs and symptoms are they showing? Are they showing early fatigue? That means that we need to increase fluid intake as well as carbohydrates and electrolytes. So we look at different things to kind of figure that out to best meet their needs. During exercise, you want about 4 to 6 ounces. So that's like a little Gatorade cup every about 15 to 20 minutes. Sorry, 15 to 20 minutes. But with that, you don't get a break every 15 to 20 minutes when you're an athlete, right? You're not like, hey coach, time out, let me go get a water break. They wouldn't appreciate that very much. Or during competition. So we train our athletes, anytime you have fluid available, you need a drink. Within that hour, you need about 16 to 24 ounces, which is, we use the liter Gatorade bottles, so that's about 1/2 to 3/4. They need to get those down at least every hour. Electrolyte intake. This one varies too, very widely. Like I said, my rule of thumb is about 500 to 100 milligrams of sodium per hour of exercise. I found that to be a very nice sweet spot for athletes. If you're a smaller athlete, you're going to be on the lower end. If you're a larger athlete, you're going to be on the upper end. Carbohydrates, I just kind of threw this at the bottom, just because if we're talking about hydration, carbohydrates don't really factor into hydration. So carbohydrates don't help you hydrate better. They actually slow down the process. So, but we need carbohydrates, we need energy when we're active, right? So we need about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates during activity to help replenish our energy stores. But the one thing to remember is we can't consume too much because it will slow down the absorption of the electrolytes into the intestines. It's something called like high osmolarity or osmolarity load. If you have too much sugar in your intestines, the osmolarity load increases and it just slows down the entire process of the sodium, potassium, all the electrolytes getting to your muscles, into your bloodstream. So, okay. So during exercise, water is great. So water is the best hydrator. But like we learned, you don't just lose water through your sweat. So we need something to replace it. So put this well-known sports drink up there. So this 20-ounce sports drink contains 270 milligrams of sodium. So it's 20 ounces of fluid, 270 milligrams of sodium. does this meet an adult athlete's sodium needs during an hour of exercise? Yeah. So there's been there's been several cases throughout, seems like every year, and it's mostly in high school, I have found. But you hear of, unfortunately, an athlete dying because they drank so much sports drink because they were, the coach told me to hydrate better. And so they just like chugged all this sports drink, like a gallon in an hour. And unfortunately, that will lead to hyponatremia, especially if you're active. So there's not enough sodium in here to meet an active athlete's sodium needs. So we have to increase it. So how can we fix the sports drink? An easy, cheap fix. What do we add to it? So about 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, table salt. You get sodium and chloride. You get 40% sodium and 60% chloride, but that brings your total to about 500 to 850. Just adding some table salt. Pretty easy fix. Okay. So I put this on here, going back to the carbohydrate discussion with, you don't want too much. So carbohydrates, you want about 5 to about 7% content of carbohydrate solution. The ranges will differ from 3 to 6 to 3 to 7, but mainly of glucose and sucrose. Sucrose, just table sugar, okay? So that shows you how to calculate. Again, if you're kind of making your own sports drink, you can calculate how much percentage of the solution is coming from a carbohydrate by looking at the total grams of carbs and dividing it by the total mils of the fluid times 100. So Gatorade is a little less than 6%. Okay, how many of you seen this product before? The Right Stuff. One? Yeah. Okay, so this is a really, really great product. It was developed by NASA for astronauts. When they re-entered Earth's atmosphere, they found that they became severely dehydrated. So they developed a product that would enter their bloodstream very quickly at the amount that they needed to stay functional. So they came up with this product, and they sold the rights to another company. But so anyways, they mainly deal with athletes, Division I programs, Major League Baseball, NFL, and so they're targeting, again, very large athletes that are sweating a lot. They're active, they're outside. So I use this product like when we're in fall camps and you're practicing in the middle of the day from 2 to 5 and it's 110 out in Lewiston, Idaho. Okay, you need something more than just Gatorade, because Gatorade's not going to do it even with some table salt. So this product has about 1,800 milligrams of sodium, 1,400 milligrams of chloride. So it's pretty potent. It's a little packet. You mix in about 20 ounces of fluid. But if I didn't have this, it would be extremely hard to replace and meet the needs of certain athletes. So this product, it's amazing. It doesn't have any sugar in it, like Gatorade. So like I was saying, sugar is going to slow down the absorption of electrolytes. It's going to increase the osmolarity load in the intestine. So if we get something in there that has no sugar in it, high in electrolytes, it's going to infuse very quickly into the body. I have done experiments, well, I mean, not purposely, but athletes, full body cramp or lower leg body cramp, you know, they get Gatorade, like when I first came there, Gatorade and Gatorlights, and it would take them about 10 minutes to come around before their legs would kind of loosen up and start walking. And so when we changed to the Right Stuff, I gave it to them Again, leg cramps. It's kind of funny because they can't move. They're walking and they just stop. So they can't move anywhere, so they're just like standing there. And you give them that, in about 2 minutes, they start loosening up. So it's pretty quick on how fast it can get into their system. Okay, post-exercise. This is about the most accurate way that's pretty simple and available to everybody to figure your post-exercise fluid needs. So you have to start off pre-exercise and do a pre-weight. So P, minimal clothing, get a weight, record it. After exercise, empty your bladder, minimal clothing, get a post-weight. Okay, so you find that figure. So say an athlete, 178 pounds, pre-weight, post-weight was 175. They've lost 3 pounds. You need to take that 3 pounds and times it by 16 to 20 ounces of fluid, because 16 ounces is about a pound. And we shoot a little bit over, because you want to a little bit overhydrate post-activity, not by much, but just by a little. And you get a range of about 48 to 60 ounces of fluid that you need to consume within the next 2 to 4 hours. Okay. The one thing that I look for, so for fall camps, for soccer, volleyball, and football teams, we do pre and post weights, and I calculate percentages of the team post practice to see if they've triggered. So a trigger is greater than 2% body weight loss. So we'll note those athletes and follow them throughout the rest of the day, and then make sure when they come back the next day they've regained that weight. It's very important that they regain the weight within about 1%, or they're going to be at high risk of injury. So we note that. But you don't want it greater than 2%. So that's where, if you're greater than 2%, then those things that I was talking about earlier kind of take an effect, where decreased reaction time, increased recovery between exercise bouts, increased risk of injury. So we want to really minimize that, and this way we can. But moving on to my next topic of strategies to keep athletes well hydrated. So this is a really easy one, cheap one, and what I found to be one of the most effective ones is you develop a hydration schedule on a gallon jug. It's reusable, it's cheap, and it's effective. We have to do this about 4 times throughout the year for certain sports because they, unintentionally lose them or break them or whatnot. But doing a hydration schedule based off of their workout schedule, and then I put a nutrition plan on the side of it. So pretty much that gallon jug is kind of like their nutrition Bible. Like, they know what to do, and it's very user-friendly and very easy to follow because everything is pretty much there for the most part. At least it gets them going. So for males, my recommendation is, because they're around 6 liters a day, that's about 1.5 gallons of fluid. So I say drink this outside of your meals. Just drink other fluids during meals and during activity, and you should be fine getting to that 6 liter. For females, they need about 3/4 of a gallon. So I tell them to drink this during meals, and then just add on what they do in activity. So it's an easy way that they can track it. I have more success with the males carrying it, just because sometimes the females are just like, I would rather carry the liter Gatorade jug versus the gallon jug, which that's totally fine. But I have found this to be very effective with most of our athletic population. Okay, so the second thing is urine specific gravity testing. So with USG, got some urine samples here. We use this to test how hydrated an athlete is going into competition. So about 36 hours out, we test the athlete, and then we understand, are they well hydrated, are they minimally dehydrated, significant, and seriously dehydrated. So we know what their hydration status is before competition, which is vital. Because like I said, if you do the weigh in and weigh out, yeah, they could lose less than 2% body weight, but they could be significantly dehydrated going into activity. So it really doesn't like benefit you as much as if we know their hydration status before going into activity. Let's see, so I got some 2 samples here. I just thought this would be a fun thing to show you guys. So with testing it, we were testing the solute concentration. So how concentrated is the urine? And so, actually, these are really nice samples, so thank you, number 1, whoever provided that. I can tell that you're well hydrated. Number 2 is a little bright yellow, but it might be from a vitamin mineral. Okay, so when I test it, the athlete's right there with me. So I tell them, so like number 1, yep, so I can tell them they're 1.005, so you're a green, okay? Yay. And then, I should wash this off between, but that's okay. And then for sample 2, oh, see if you take a vitamin and mineral, they're right on the borderline, so they're 1.0103. So they are minimally dehydrated. But the color can sometimes be deceiving. This is an Otago pen. This is fantastic because it, as you saw, it can read within a few seconds. And if I'm testing 40 athletes in just like 30 minutes, I can actually do it if they're somewhat patient. So this is a fantastic tool because like I said, you can see the hydration status before activity and then you can correct it. So I need about 36 hours so we don't overload them in fluid, and so their body has time to absorb it into their tissue. I've had athletes seriously dehydrated multiple times, so it's really great being able to say, hey, you need to really focus in the next 24 hours and get your hydration status back in check, and I feel like that significantly impacts their performance the next day. So this is a very, very helpful tool with educating the athlete, and they see, like I said, they know what green, yellow, orange, red means. They know that and they can grasp onto it. So where hydration sometimes is less like obvious. Because if I asked our athletes, how many of you are well hydrated in here? If I asked you how many of you are well hydrated, 80% of you or more would say, yeah, I'm well hydrated. But in the athletic population, only about 20% are actually well hydrated. So until we start doing this stuff. Questions? Okay, I'll get you. Yeah, go ahead.
How beneficial is PLI? How beneficial is PLI?
PLI is, so it's for kiddos. So it's going to be less like sodium content, potassium content. It's a good pre-hydrator. So if you're wanting to pre-hydrate before an event, totally great. If you're using it to hydrate during an event, not probably. Yeah. So look at the sodium level. It's going to be lower. Yeah. But it's totally fine to drink it pre and then post too.
So you mentioned that there's a pretty wide range on people's sweat. So assuming that someone is well hydrated, sweating more people than you should is going to burn that. Or just like.
Yeah, so that's kind of a two-part one. So the more conditioned you are, the more you sweat. It doesn't matter, like if you are well hydrated, yes, your body's going to sweat more because it can control the body temperature more efficiently. So you're going to produce more sweat. So yes, if you are well hydrated, you will sweat more, but that's a good thing. Burning fat, I don't know if there's, hydration. I mean, it's going to impact it because every cell is made up of fluid, so your metabolism is just going to be more effective. The effectiveness, I don't know, like how much more it's enhanced.
I had a doctor tell me that you pinch your forearm kind of like that, and your skin will separate from the muscle, but that can be a good way to tell if you're.
Yep.
Is that true?
Turgor, yeah, the skin, basically, yes. So there are ranges with minimal and the moderate and severe dehydration, like how many seconds it takes to return. So yes, if it returns very quickly, if it snaps back, well hydrated. If it kind of goes, that means you're like minimally. And then if it's like, I think it's like 2 seconds, it's moderate, and then severe is greater than 3. Don't quote me on that one, but I think it's around those. So yes, because you will pit, it's kind of like, it's not, you might have edema down in your legs and your arms and wrist, but that's going to be more seen in like the hyponatremia, where you'll have swelling if you don't have enough sodium. Your body doesn't know, again, that sodium and potassium pump is messed up. But yeah, the skin reflex, or turgor, I think that's what it's called, it's going to bounce back really quickly if you're well hydrated. Good question. Question? Yeah.
Just a little bit confused on, you mentioned how babies have higher water content. So they have less muscle mass. So do they have a higher water content because there's less dense?
Yeah, everything is like forming and like solidifying. So I don't want to say they're like Jell-O, but they kind of are, yeah. And even though they have a high fat content, they do have a high content of brown fat, which is a type of fat that acts like muscle. It burns energy. It's kind of weird. Yeah. Some athletes, like swimmers, have a lot of brown fat because they're in cold temperatures for a long time. But it acts like as a muscle, so it kind of burns and metabolizes like a muscle would. But no, things are solidifying. Yeah, their skeletal structure is still very young, still forming. Yeah.
So you talked about the right stuff. I'm wondering, so say that I'm not athletic, but the right stuff sounds cool, and so I'm going to drink it. Will there be any negative impacts of using the right stuff when it's not necessary?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to obviously contribute to your like sodium intake. So if you have a history of high blood pressure, I would not take it. Because sodium is going to increase blood pressure or the pressure. So if you have any risk of that, then or pre-hypertensive, you won't need that. Other than that, it might just make you feel bloated for a little bit. Just so you know, fluid content is going to happen. You don't need to take it if you are not doing intense activity greater than an hour. So it is really intended for the athletic population. If you want to try it, and like if you're training for something, do a half, dilute that. I do that for the female athletes. I'll dilute it to where they're only getting half the amount. So sodium-wise, you're looking at, it's going to be around 900 milligrams of sodium, but you need to be active for at least greater than an hour and sweating. If you're just kind of walking around, you probably don't need it. Because in America, if we look at the general population, we consume too much sodium, right? That leads to chronic diseases, high blood pressure, cardiovascular problems. So we need to be conscientious of the sodium intake. Yeah, that's where sports drinks, I feel, fall short with potassium, because potassium really helps regulate that sodium content. So for athletes who I deal with that have pre-hypertension or hypertension, I really don't look at their sodium intake because I know that they need it. I look at their potassium intake because I know it's extremely low. So if I can increase our potassium intake through lots of vegetables, lots of fruits, the sodium intake will take care of itself. If we can increase the potassium, it will relax the blood vessels. So, yeah. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate the 2 samples. So sample 1, you're well hydrated. Sample 2, you're just minimally, you're just right there. It's not, that's pretty good. So I'm used to seeing a lot of orange and reds in certain teams. More oranges, a few reds. But, well, thank you.